The Grand Hotel stood tall in the city, its shiny glass windows reflecting the busy streets below. Inside, everything was pristine, luxurious carpets, golden chandeliers, and the faint smell of expensive perfume. It was the kind of place where only the rich could afford to stay. A family of 3 walked through the entrance. The mother, in a worn-out coat, held her daughter's hand, who clung to her tightly. The father, his clothes patched from years of use, walked behind them, his shoulders slumped. Their faces showed the exhaustion of a long journey. They had been through hard times, and they had nowhere else to go. The hotel staff glanced at them with judgment in their eyes. They didn't belong here. Not in a place like this. The family was ushered into the lobby, trying to ignore the stares from others. As the family stood in the lobby, the manager of the hotel noticed them. He was a tall, well-dressed man, his suit impeccable, and his watch shining brightly under the lobby lights. His eyes scanned the family, then narrowed with a look of disdain. They didn't belong here. The rich man, with a cold voice, turned to the staff. "What are they doing here?" he asked, barely masking his judgment. The receptionist, nervous but trying to be polite, replied, "They've come to check in, sir." The manager scoffed. "They don't belong in this hotel," he muttered. "Get them out of here." The family, unaware of what was being said, stood awkwardly by the front desk. The father, trying to keep his head up, stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir, But the manager cut him off, raising a hand. "No excuses. We don't accept people like you here." His voice was sharp, and his words stung. The mother's face flushed with embarrassment, but she tried to stay calm. The little girl looked up at her, confused. "Why won't they let us stay, Mommy?" The father couldn't answer. All he could do was look down in shame. The family stood outside the hotel, feeling humiliated. The cold air hit them like a slap. They walked away slowly, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty street. The father, his head low, tried to keep his composure, but his heart ached. He had always done his best to protect his family, but this felt different. It was like the world had turned its back on them. The mother held her daughter's hand tightly, but her own hands trembled. She didn't know where to go. They had no money left, no friends to turn to. The night was growing darker, and they had no shelter. "I'm sorry," the father muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. "I thought we could make it." The mother said nothing. She didn't know what to say. The little girl tugged at her sleeve, her innocent voice breaking the silence. "Mommy, why can't we stay in that nice hotel? You said we'd be okay." The mother's heart broke at her daughter's words. She knelt down to her level, brushing her hair out of her face. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's just, sometimes things don't work out the way we hope." The father looked away, trying to hide the tears in his eyes. They kept walking, unsure of what the next day would bring. They had nothing left but each other, and in that moment, that felt like the only thing that mattered. As the family walked further down the street, their heads bowed, a car pulled up outside the hotel. It wasn't a flashy, expensive car, but it was well kept. The driver stepped out, and a man in a simple coat and hat stepped onto the sidewalk. He was the owner of the hotel, but he didn't look like the kind of man who would run such an extravagant place. His shoes were scuffed, and his coat didn't have the same polished look as the manager's suit. He looked like an ordinary man, someone you could pass by without a second thought. The hotel staff greeted him warmly, but something was off. The owner noticed the cold atmosphere inside, and a few hushed words caught his attention. "What happened with that family?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. The receptionist hesitated, glancing at the manager before speaking. They didn't have enough money. The manager told them to leave." The owner frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. Something didn't sit right with him. He asked more questions, trying to piece together what had really happened. He didn't like the way the story sounded. Something had to be done. The hotel owner walked into the lobby with a firm yet calm demeanor. He glanced at the staff, who quickly straightened up, sensing something was about to happen. The rich man was standing near the front desk, looking over some papers. When he saw the owner approaching, he quickly adjusted his posture and flashed a polite smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. The owner didn't waste time with pleasantries. He turned to the manager, his voice sharp. "I heard what happened. Why was that family kicked out?" The manager stiffened, clearly trying to stay composed. They didn't belong here, sir. They didn't fit the hotel's standards. The owner's eyes narrowed. Standards? They were just trying to find a place to stay. You have no right to judge them based on their appearance or their situation. The rich man tried to defend himself. But sir, they were not guests we typically accommodate. They looked out of place. The owner's expression darkened. Out of place, he repeated. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what they look like or how much money they have. This is a place for hospitality, not discrimination. The manager's face reddened, and he tried to argue further. But we're a luxury hotel, and the owner cut him off. This hotel's purpose is to provide comfort and kindness, not to humiliate people. You've forgotten what matters. The manager was taken aback, the words cutting deeper than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but the owner's stare silenced him. The owner stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he looked at the manager. The tension in the room was thick, but the owner wasn't backing down. Get the family, the owner said, his voice firm but calm. Bring them back inside. The manager hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard. He didn't know what to say, but he knew the owner wasn't going to change his mind. He nodded slowly and turned to one of the staff members. Go find them, he ordered. The staff member hurried out the door, and the owner turned back to the manager, his expression serious. You'll learn that kindness is far more valuable than money and status, he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Moments later, the family returned to the hotel, led by the staff member. The mother looked around nervously, unsure if they were being brought back in only to be humiliated again. But when she saw the owner standing there, she felt a small glimmer of hope. The owner smiled gently at them. You are welcome to stay. We'll treat you with the respect you deserve. The father, surprised, looked at the owner with wide eyes. Are you sure? We don't have much money. The owner raised a hand, stopping him. Money doesn't matter here. You're guests in my hotel now, and that's all that matters. The family stood still, stunned by the kindness they were receiving. The rich man stood off to the side, fuming. His face turned bright red as he watched the family being treated like royalty, the same family he had just kicked out. He couldn't believe what was happening. His hands clenched into fists, and he tried to hide his frustration behind a forced smile. Are you really going to let them stay? He asked, his voice sharp as he turned to the owner. They don't belong here. You're making a mistake. The owner looked at him without a hint of emotion. No, you're the one who's made a mistake, he replied calmly. You've forgotten what this hotel is about. It's about hospitality, not about judging people based on their appearance or their wealth. The rich man's face twisted in disbelief. I'm the one who runs this hotel. I decide who stays and who doesn't. The owner shook his head. Not anymore. I've made my decision. If you can't respect my rules, then perhaps it's time you leave. The manager was taken aback, the words hitting him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to argue, but the owner's steady gaze silenced him. It was clear. The balance of power in the hotel had shifted. The family walked through the hotel's grand lobby once again, but this time, everything felt different. The mother glanced around in disbelief. The expensive carpets, the golden chandeliers, the smiling staff, none of it seemed as cold as it did before. She held her daughter's hand tightly, her heart swelling with gratitude. The little girl looked up at her mother, her eyes wide with wonder. Are we really staying here, Mommy? She asked, her voice full of excitement. The mother nodded, smiling through the tears that were beginning to form. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be okay. The father, still trying to wrap his mind around everything, looked at the owner with deep appreciation. Thank you. We don't know what to say. The owner smiled kindly. You don't have to say anything, just enjoy your stay. They were led to a beautiful room, bigger than anything they had ever imagined. The bed was soft and inviting, and the view from the window was breathtaking. For the first time in a long while, the family felt a sense of peace. As they settled in, the little girl ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass, staring out at the city below. It's so beautiful, she whispered. The mother and father stood together, looking at their daughter. In that moment, they knew things were starting to change. This small act of kindness was a spark, a glimmer of hope that perhaps their lives could take a new direction. The rich man sat in his office, fuming with anger. His mind raced with thoughts of everything that had just happened. How could the owner do this to him? He had worked hard to get to where he was. He deserved to be in charge, not some ordinary man who didn't understand the rules of business. The door to his office opened, and the owner walked in without knocking. The manager stood up quickly, trying to hide his frustration. But the owner's expression was serious, his face stern. "I've made my decision," the owner said. "Your actions were unacceptable. This hotel is about treating everyone with respect, and you failed to do that." The rich man tried to argue, but the owner cut him off. "You're no longer the manager. You've lost your position." The words hit him like a punch in the gut. He couldn't believe it. "You can't do this. I've worked here for years. I built this place." The owner shook his head. "You may have helped build this hotel, but you've forgotten its true purpose. Respect and kindness come first. If you can't understand that, you're not fit to work here." The manager stood there in stunned silence as the owner turned and left the office. It was over. He was out. The family stayed at the hotel for the next few days, grateful for the kindness they had been shown. They were treated with respect, and for the first time in a long while, they felt valued. The little girl played happily, her laughter echoing in the halls, while her parents found a small sense of peace. As they checked out, the mother looked around one last time, taking in the warmth and kindness that had made their stay so memorable. The owner came to see them off, smiling as he shook their hands. "Take care of each other," he said gently. The family walked out of the hotel, their hearts lighter than they had been in a long time. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure. Kindness and respect were the things that mattered most. And as for the rich man, his lesson was clear. Money could buy many things, but it couldn't buy the most important one: humanity.